I'd like to welcome everyone to this regular Puslinch Council meeting on July 17th, 2019. We'll start with disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof.
Yes, I have two.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have two. The first is, the item is the correspondence from Lafarge and the ERO posting. And the general nature of the pecuniary interest is that I have a family member that operates an aggregate business within the township of Puslinch. The second one is the delegation by Mr. McNee regarding potential zone change at 6947 concession 2. And it's for the same reason a family member operates an aggregate business within the township of Puslinch.
Okay, thank you. We have no closed items, and we'll move on to adoption and receipt of minutes. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spoulos, that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as written and distributed. A, closed council meeting June 5th, 2019. B, council meeting June 12th, 2019. Closed council meeting June 12th, 2019. Public meeting for zoning amendment file D14/ELL June 19th, 2019. Public meeting for proposed development charges bylaw June 19th, 2019. F, council meeting June 19th, 2019. G is closed council meeting June 19th, 2019. H, public meeting for feasibility study for municipal water and wastewater services June 24th, 2019. Any questions or comments on those minutes? Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right. Do we have any business arising out of the previous minutes? Oh, seeing none. Okay. All right, we have a public meeting. We have the proposed concept plan for the accessible walking trail at Fox Run Park. This public information meeting will be held on Monday, July 22nd, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. at the Puslinch Community Center, 23 Brock Road South. All right. Communications. So let me scroll down here. So our first one we're going to look at is do we have, that's not for Amanda to come down and talk about? No, you can talk. All right, this is the communications from the annual Wellington Common Elements Condominium Corporation. Any questions or comments on that one?
I'll be making a motion with respect to that report and the other two reports put together by our consultant. So I'll try to lump them all together rather than doing a piecemeal.
That sounds good.
That's appropriate.
Any other questions or comments on that? Councilor Palmer?
Just one. I must admit, although there's a lot of difficult news here for the residents of Mini Lakes to digest, I'm sure they're already aware of it from what I understand from the report. The one thing that I see positive from this is that they have, it appears to me they've opted to go with a different technology that has the capacity at least to finally achieve the parameters that the approval of this development was based on by the OMB initially. So I guess my expectation is that if and when the system is replaced with the new system, I'm hoping this municipality will be seeking that the certificate of approval is amended to better reflect what the original approval was based on. Because right now, we've had several amendments, and it's very far from what was originally envisioned for the place. So I guess if I could see a silver lining out of that, that's what I would see coming out of this requirement to update the system.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Palmer. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Amanda is up next, but we're pretty close to delegation. So I'll invite Mr. McNee down to the table at this time. Yes. So what I generally tell people is we just ask that you speak into the microphone. That way the people in the gallery can hear you.
Can hear us well behind? Yes, absolutely.
Before you start, I'll just remind that we have a pecuniary interest declared, and Councillor Goyda will not be commenting or taking questions regarding the presentation.
Okay, not a problem. Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight on behalf of our neighbourhood group, the Mill Creek Stewards, regarding our concerns over the new owner of lots 18, 19, and 20 on concession 2. Our group calls this a preemptive presentation, so it will be short, and for the same reason, we decided to just have a rep from each of the concerned areas attend rather than crowd the room. Crowd will be for next time. Our reps are the two generations of the Nagel family, living on two properties on Concession 2 and Side Road 20. They represent those abutting the concerned property. And as well, we have Dr. Buchanan Smith from Concession 3, representing the general residents of the township. Our concerns are with the property shown in the photograph on page 1. Did everybody get that handout? Yes, Grant. So on page 1, if you pass the contents, you'll see a picture of the old Edward Lake Farm on 2nd Concession, Puslinch, which for simplicity we'll call the Mill Creek property. Ed died 3 years ago, and this 220-acre property passed to his two sons, who last summer made a private sale with no listed value to the Brazilian-owned aggregate extraction company Votorantim CBM. Multiple drill holes were placed and monitored on the property throughout the autumn of 2018, and the Stage 2 archaeological survey was conducted just last week. Though we are aware no application has yet been submitted, these actions support our expectation of a request in the near future for a zoning change from natural environment to aggregate extraction, and a planning amendment from core greenland to extractive. See pages 2 and 3 respective. It's worth noting on pages 2 and 3, the property is marked by an X. And on both the zoning and planning maps, that X is in the middle of the largest green space remaining in Puslinch. The reason we're making this early presentation is, first of all, because we wish to give the company notice that there is and will continue to be opposition from the neighborhood. And secondly, because we feel it's important the township have an opportunity to make an early position statement as well. We feel that early statement is important because in the case of the Aikinsville property proposal, turned down for a pit back in 2010, the OMB board stated that council decisions, both county and township, were so variable and without reasons as to have little weight. We want to help ensure any subsequent council positions on extraction have the necessary timely information to avoid similar confusion. Page 4 of your handout shows an aerial view of the region surrounding this Mill Creek property of concern. You can't tell from this photograph, but the second concession across the top of the photo is a no-truck traffic road due to the style of bridge crossing over an important feature of Puslinch Township, the Mill Creek, which flows along the length of this property of concern. This creek has been in the news recently, we all know, because of the significant fuel spill that occurred at the Hanlon Expressway and 401 Junction in January of this year. And we bring this Mill Creek up not as a tangent, but because it, and not NIMBYism, lies at the heart of our objection to the possibility of this property becoming a gravel pit. A similar situation to the Aikinsville pit again, where the OMB board recognized water as the central issue. You can see in the same photo almost 1,500 acres on the Mill Creek's east bank, which have already been exhaustively excavated, with almost all of that excavation below the water table. These pits have continued to expand south, north, and east. And just a decade ago, this mining had compromised the Mill Creek ecosystem so extensively that the GRCA was forced to direct the gravel companies to take remedial action. Although the pattern of extraction on the part of the corporations has not changed, this remedial work has at least supplied the Mill Creek with some time by implementing the equivalent of life support measures. And these measures have established the appearance of a healthy system, reflected in a 2019 study just completed by the GRCA. But let's not fool ourselves. That is not a naturally healthy system. They have not reestablished a system with finely graded implementation of filtration, water flow, and hydrological pressure, but rather artificially staged implementation in just a few steps and much more susceptible to failure. Now it appears the aggregate companies wish to shift westward, for the first time crossing the Mill Creek to its west bank into natural environment and core greenland areas, shown on page 5, further stressing this creek on life support, as well as its supporting tributaries and surrounding wetlands. Mr. Mayor and Council, we recognize the province needs gravel. We know Puslinch not only has the gravel to meet those demands, and has been doing that for over a century and continues to do so. That's what responsibility is, and it's part of being a federal, provincial, and municipal community. But for a community at any level to be healthy, a position stressed by the Aikinsville OMB board again, responsibilities need to be balanced by rights. And the township's rights in this case are 1, to be heard at senior levels of government, 2, to a fair assessment of risk versus gain when a property is being considered for gravel extraction, And 3, to the return in a reasonable time frame of any land used for gravel in a form that's either revenue or lifestyle enhancing to the township. In this case, if we look at that balance of risk versus gain, gain for the corporation is straightforward. A strip of quality gravel extending to a limited hill of gravel is shown in the soil survey on page 6. Albeit almost all in a floodplain, and access to which is significantly compromised by bordering wetlands and watercourses. The risks for the township are also straightforward. The local immediate neighborhood endures noise, dust, traffic, and property value losses as much as 30%, impact shown on page 7. The much more extensive neighborhood suffers increased traffic, road wear, and decreased safety as a result of new hauling routes made available following required Concession 2 bridge renovations. And the whole township loses because extraction from this limited availability pit poses significant cumulative risk of irreversible Mill Creek ecosystem damage for the Puss Lynch community. And you'll see the floodplains, watercourse, and wetlands shown on page 8. With additional risk to flood control and drinking water supply for a downstream community more extensive than Puss Lynch. Additionally, the township loses valuable produce and tax-generating farmland in exchange for minimal revenue-generating pit land when balanced against the increased costs. To be fair, we should include long-term gains for Puss Lynch associated with rehabilitation. 16 pits in Puss Lynch are now listed as rehabilitated, if you accept overgrown ponds with sand gravel shores and extensive brush borders. In the neighborhood of the Mill Creek property itself, we only need to look back to page 4 to assess rehabilitation. There is actually a research fish farm on a quarter acre of those 1,500 acres. To be equally fair, we should also include long-term risks for Puss Lynch with respect to company guarantees regarding pit lifespans, borders, and extraction depths. For those answers, we only have to look at page 4 again. The pits at the top left were to close by 2015. They're still open. The borders of the pits shown bottom center were to remain well clear of the Crieff Hills Retreat community, and they've just been extended. And the lovely blue-green pit shown bottom right was to remain above the water table. Sarcasm aside, Puss Lynch as a township can't afford much more of this pit stress, especially occurring outside of township planning. And the Mill Creek as an ecosystem can't afford any more stress at all. As it stands today with respect to aggregate extraction in Puss Lynch, there does not appear to be the necessary balancing of rights and responsibilities required for the growth of a healthy community. And for that reason, we ask the Council to consider the group's requests made on page 9. Summarizing these requests, we recognize these are early days for discussing this Mill Creek property, but it's a long overdue day for the reopening of discussion on Puss Lynch gravel extraction in general, especially where it conflicts with the clear expression of township and county planners. We feel this Mill Creek case, given the clear imbalance of risks and gains, gives Council an opportunity to draw a line by expressing at this early time their concern with the possibility of any further valuable wetland, farming acreage, or critical creek ecosystems being threatened by zoning changes for the purpose of gravel extraction in Puss Lynch, unless gain can be clearly shown to outweigh risk. And with respect to the township itself, given the clear imbalance of rights and responsibilities in what is now 2019, we are asking the Council to consider readdressing the situation perceived in 1985 by initiating in September a discussion at TAPMO regarding the above conflict that puts at risk the health of all our communities. Many thanks for your time, Council, and as a concerned neighborhood dealing with an aggregate issue, we have no doubt we will unfortunately be seeing you more often. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilor Spillis?
Yes, your dissertation, can we have a copy of it?
You certainly can.
Yeah, no, thanks for the heads up on what's happening here. Certainly, I don't know what we can do at this stage of the game, given that application has not been made. But I can assure you, I'll be looking into it, see what we can do before the application is made. So I'm not holding out any promises or anything, but if there's something can be done, I'm sure the Council and I will come up with.
Councilor Roth?
Thank you very much. I certainly share your concerns, and we will do what we can when the time comes.
Councilor Bomer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Welcome, and thank you for your thoughtful presentation. Just a couple of questions, if it's okay. Have you been following the changes the province has made through to the Planning Act through Bill 108 recently?
Unfortunately, yes. And I gather from Gravel Watch that's one of the reasons an application like this has not already been made, because they're waiting the changes.
Yes, and then, of course, if you've been dealing with Gravel Watch, you'll understand there's also changes coming to the Aggregate Resources Act.
Yes.
Okay, even though they're all going to make all of our jobs a little more difficult, I expect. I really appreciate you talking about rights and responsibilities. To me, I look at these things, to be honest, I look at aggregate extraction as one of the potentially most benign forms of resource extraction you could possibly have if it were done right.
Couldn't agree more.
But when we look at the history here, to go back to your point of rights and responsibilities, I always, it makes me think of a term, a legal term, there's no rights without a remedy. And what I mean by that is our residents, because there's no enforcement, there's no rights. And to me, it always comes down to the lack of enforcement that erodes the residents' rights of protection and the natural environment's rights. And you don't have to look any farther than the history with the University of Guelph pit. I think it's important that your group educate yourself on, the trajectory that's been on. You mentioned the back end of it and the removal of that plantation, but even if you look at what the OMB approved, the plans that were approved there, and how the pit was ultimately excavated had very little to do with how it was promised to do or was proposed to do, which led to some of the impacts on the creek. And that's where my issue always is that these things happen, no enforcements, and the only people that are the only people that are actually have to follow the decisions of the Ontario Municipal Board is the municipality. No one else seems to be bound by that decision, and that's a challenge for me. It's a struggle, because in our job we have to try and put faith in something, and if we can't put faith in something, what are you supposed to put faith in? So I understand where you're coming from. You've obviously done your research, and my phone works if you ever want to call. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. May I respond to that?
We're not supposed to have a
okay.
dialogue.
Not at all.
He offered up you can give him a call
Yes,
later
absolutely.
after the council meeting. I would also like to sympathize with you. Every time I see this satellite picture, it makes me so upset to see what the aggregate industry has done to the community down there on the second concession. And unfortunately, we have a province that is pro-aggregate, and I believe that the red tape is being cut, and it's going to be a difficult challenge to slow down the aggregate industry. But I can assure you that my phone is open as well, and I'll meet with your association whenever. I did call the county once I saw your delegation and asked if there was an application submitted, and they informed me it has not happened. But I'm also going to meet with the county planning staff maybe as early as next week, just to get ahead of this a little bit. We'll listen to you, and we'll do what we can. It's a very, very difficult battle in the Cranberry Area Association. One of them's in the gallery now. They might be a good resource for you as well. Okay?
Wonderful. Thanks for
Thank you very much.
Nina?
Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Sapoulis. The council receives the presentation by John McNee on behalf of the neighborhood group with respect to a potential zone change of the property municipally known as 6947 Concession 2 in a budding lot to the east from agricultural to extractive. All in favor? Carried. I'll ask the next delegation to come down to the table, which is Glenn James. If he's in. Welcome. As I tell every other delegation, just try to speak into the microphone so the gallery.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, thanks very much for the opportunity to present to you tonight. I'm here in relation to a motion that appears on the agenda for tonight's meeting around the creation of a local committee that has to do with the acceleration of high-speed internet infrastructure in Puslinch. There's also another component to that motion that has to do with the possible representation of Puslinch on a county steering committee with the same subject matter. I thought maybe what I'd do is spend a moment just to introduce myself so you know who I am. My wife and I have lived in Puslinch for a long time. Professionally, I've been involved in the tech business for about 36 years, ending late last year. a wide variety of technologies, hardware and software development and that sort of thing. In 2002, I co-founded a company that primarily did software development work for large organizations. And happily, we sold it late last year after 16 years. And I'm fully retired from professional life now, with the exception of working for a few hours a week on the closing terms of that agreement by the purchaser last year. I don't have a lot of experience as it relates to telecommunications. I've never worked for a telco. We've done a little bit of professional work over the years for telecommunications companies, but nothing as it relates to internet service and that sort of thing. But I do have a lot of experience around large, complex RFPs that relate to technology in the province of Ontario, and specifically vendor of record agreements and that sort of thing. Through just general interest on my own, I've become familiar with the operations of SWIFT and the predecessor to that, EORN, which is the Eastern Ontario Regional Network as well. Like a lot of other folks locally, but also across the province and across the country, I'm quite frustrated with the lack of availability of high-speed internet in rural areas. It's getting better, but very gradually. And I think that there are some things that we should be able to do to accelerate it. A while ago, I started to communicate with some of the members of council and the mayor on an informal level about this subject. And I've also talked with a lot of friends and neighbors about this. And the conclusion that I've come to is that we need to put together a local committee made up of perhaps residents and business folks in Puslinch, with the specific objective of trying to accelerate the adoption or the deployment of high-speed internet infrastructure in Puslinch. But also to provide a voice for people in Puslinch around their frustrations with high-speed internet or the lack thereof and that sort of thing. In addition to that, we'd like to be able to advocate directly to SWIFT or indirectly, whatever the case may be. And we want to make sure that the RFP that's going to hit the streets very soon is set up in such a way that it would encourage people or encourage private companies to invest locally in the deployment of high-speed infrastructure here. It's also important, I think, to have a presence at the county level, and just once again, the motion that is you'll see tonight has to do with that. So we'd be pleased to be involved in terms of representation at the county level too, at the steering committee around this same subject. I think it's really important, though, that I've mentioned SWIFT a couple of times, that we also look beyond SWIFT. It's quite possible that the RFP that's going to be on the street very soon and the results of that RFP won't benefit us here locally. We hope that it will, and we hope that maybe there's some things that we can do so that it can, but it's possible that it won't. So we're going to have to look longer term here at what we might be able to do beyond SWIFT. And what those actions might be, not sure yet. So what would this sort of committee look like? We think it would have 5 or so members. We're not tied to a specific number. It would include a councillor, we hope, and either as an observer or as a full member. That's up to council. And right away, we would put together a work plan for the committee so that we had a clear path forward. We haven't done that yet, obviously. There is no committee at this point, in case you're wondering, but there would be soon. The purpose, as I mentioned earlier, of the committee would be to accelerate the deployment of high-speed infrastructure. But it would also be in the mandate of the committee to make sure that there's two-way communication with the people and the businesses of Puslinch around this and as we go forward. It's sometimes difficult for people and businesses to decipher what's in the news and understand what's going on at SWIFT and what's going on with the funding behind SWIFT and so forth. And we would hope that we would be a positive force in that regard, be able to provide that kind of communication. The committee would have a professional tone. We want to make sure that we use Robert's Rules of Order. This is would be a very professional initiative, and we want to make sure that, especially if we have local council involvement, that we do so with the highest degree of professionalism. It may be the case at some point that we have a public information meeting as part of the two-way communication that I mentioned. The people who would be on the committee. It would be great to have telco experience, something I don't have. It would be nice to have people with technology experience. Of course, we'd have to have people who are able to devote the time necessary for this. It would be good to have a combination of residents and business people as well. And it would be very nice to have somebody with the competency around communications and advocacy work as well. The committee would be chosen through people's expressions of interest as a result of us spreading the word about the committee through Facebook and local websites and word of mouth and that sort of thing. So in conclusion, I think that council support of this committee would be beneficial to its function. It would make it more efficient. It would certainly provide it with the credibility I think that it would need. And I am pleased to lead the formation of the committee locally. And I would be pleased to represent Puslinch at the county level at the steering committee in regard to high-speed internet as well. Once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and I'd be pleased to take whatever questions you might have.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Councillor Spoulos?
I have no questions. I have comments as I made the motion, and let the other councillors make their questions.
Councillor Roth?
I don't really have any questions, but I think it's a very welcome initiative, and certainly have my support. Anything we can do to increase high-speed internet in rural areas it's just so important today for everyone. It's not just the tech people, it's everyone needs it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So thank you very much for your delegation, and we'll be talking about, I guess, a little later when Councillor Spoulos gives his notion.
Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Welcome. Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation. I got to say, thank you so much for sharing the documents that we have here and that you provided us earlier on regarding the experience in Mississippi Mills and the EORN project. Were very, very informative. I would imagine from the EORN documents, those best practices and lessons learned, that's going to be pretty much foundational reading for anybody who joins your committee, would it not?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would certainly hope, too, that the folks at SWIFT have been exposed to all of those documents, too. And so part of our initiative will be to make sure that they're aware of the experience that EORN has had.
Yeah.
And it may sound like that's simple and it's a given, and they have that, but it's not necessarily the case. The last EORN project, the funded project concluded, at the end of 2014. So it was a while ago.
Well, one of the things that stood out for me in that document from the lessons learned from the EORN project was, the willingness and that making a mistake is okay, that the committee had to have that mindset and recognize that their role was to be a catalyst. And I wondered, how do you see your committee acting as a catalyst? Down here, how do you see your committee acting as a catalyst?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's safe to say I don't have all the answers yet.
Yeah.
And I think that having really good committee members will help us develop those answers. But I think that part of what we could do is that we could work on an informal level directly with the 32 telecommunication service providers that are on SWIFT's list to see what their thinking is about the investment that they have or have not made locally. I think that in a lot of cases, the telecommunications companies are torn across so many pieces of geography. And for instance, I think Bell spent $1 billion in the city of Toronto on fiber. And they're like any other organization, they have limited funds and they're trying to figure out what to do with them. I think that if they understood the groundswell of desire and support for having better service at an affordable rate in Puslinch, that they might be more amenable to making the investment. We don't know that, but certainly it would help us. It would help them understand better the demand for it here and the challenges that we have, and the fact that we're in such close proximity to a great internet service. Just a few kilometers away. That's what makes this kind of frustrating.
Yeah. Super. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Goyda?
Thanks for coming today, and I want to applaud you for sort of taking the bull by the horns on this. I know, having high-speed internet in this day and age it's just as important as having a phone or having, it's such an imperative service to have. And, I know just based on my own personal experience, both at home and as a business owner, that not having adequate internet is just so frustrating. And I think to the point where it even actually deters people from moving here and deters businesses from setting up here, because they rely, everyone is so reliant on high-speed internet, and if you can't get it, you don't want to come here. And so, and having said that, in my frustration with it, it's like I want to do something, but I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to do it. And so I think it's really awesome that you're sort of, saying enough is enough, and we want to do something about it, and you are. And so, I'm wholeheartedly in support of that. So.
Thank you.
I appreciate your presentation. I want to ask you, will you be advocating for 5G cell towers every 5 kilometers through the township? Because we have a contentious issue that we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
If the council creates this committee that then goes out and says, we want to put 100 cell towers in the township, we're going to have some full seats for the next little while.
And I can appreciate that. And I'm one of those people too. I love the aesthetic of where we live, and I love the feel of it. So it's a big issue. In my mind, if we had it to do all over again in terms of SWIFT, then I'd be heavily in favor of running fiber down every county road and letting and having that publicly funded with terminals for that fiber at every concession road, and allowing then private investment to reach out from there. That would be the best way, in my mind, to cover as much geography as possible without having oodles and oodles of towers and relay towers and so forth. I'm not sure whether that's possible or whether a component of the SWIFT initiative can be changed a little bit to allow for more fiber coverage so that we don't have to have, oodles and oodles of 5G towers all over the place. But all of that being said, it's not likely that I know down my gravel road, that I'm ever going to see fiber. So it's very likely that when I'm able to have 50 download and 10 upload speeds, that it's going to be as a result of some sort of fixed wireless. All of that being said, there are other technologies that are moving now that may overtake all of this. There's low orbit satellites now that are being developed, and that technology is designed to serve people in remote areas, and it could be that technology works for our needs as well. Not sure when it's going to be commercially available. The first implementation of that out of, I think, 12,000 satellites for one company, and 60 have been launched. So when the rest of them are launched, it's going to provide huge and stiff competition to the existing players, and that in and of itself will, I hope, help push them along. But, who knows what other technologies might be available to us.
Okay, we just have to be cognizant of the fact
Yep.
that people are not happy with towers.
I'm well aware.
I'm going to ask you to stay seated there as we're going to move to Councillor Spoole's notice of
Sure.
motion, and then there might be some further questions. So I'm just going to receive your delegation, and then we'll move to the notice of motion. Moved by Councillor Spoole, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that Council receives a presentation by Glenn James with respect to the proposed Puslinch High-Speed Internet Committee. All in favor? Council's okay with that? We're going to move to notice of motion for John Spoolis. Let's see. Do you want me to read it, or?
Your call.
I'll read it. So we have a notice of motion. Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Bulmer, whereas adequate internet service is lacking in most parts of Puslinch, and whereas Wellington County, in conjunction with SWIFT, is proceeding with a pilot project for the county for the summer 2019, and whereas there a need for a knowledgeable township representative on the county steering committee when it is convened, and whereas the provision of any internet services provided by the pilot project in Puslinch will still likely leave the majority of Puslinch underserviced. Therefore, be it resolved, the council acknowledges the formation of a community-led committee to advance the provision of improved internet services for the township, and that council supports the appointment of Glenn James as Puslinch representative on the Wellington County Steering Committee, and the council appoints a member of council to the committee, and that councillor, we'll decide that, be appointed as a council representative of the 2018-2022 term of council, and that this motion be forwarded to Wellington County for their furtherance. So, sorry about that, you. So, Councillor Goyda, do you have, this is his motion, or, oh, sorry, or I can go that way. So,
It's
we
mine.
need somebody to volunteer, per se, for the position.
Councilor Bulmer, do you want to speak?
You want to speak first, Councillor Bulmer, on this?
Yes, sir, thank you.
You two are the most small.
Well, I support this resolution, and I'd like to volunteer.
Nominate?
I'd gladly nominate, voluntold. I'd nominate Councillor Sapoulis to this position. If I recall correctly, he did campaign on this issue, and at least in the literature I saw on other people's doors, it was an important issue to Mr. Sapoulis. So I think it's only appropriate that, as someone who championed this during the election, that I'd like to put his name forward to be our representative.
Councillor Goyda?
Yes, I would agree with that. I just didn't want to volunteer you for that if that's something you didn't want to do. So, yeah, I absolutely would support that.
Councillor Rowe?
I agree.
And I concur. Congratulations on your new position. Do you want to write his name in there so it's legible? And then do we want to have some discussion on the motion? We obviously have somebody appointed to the committee, so I believe we could probably just have a vote to all in favor of creating this committee.
I just want to clarify, this is a committee led by the community. It's not a committee of council like the rec committee or anything like that. So we deliberately discussed that, the three of us, Councilor Bulmer, Mr. James, and we thought to be more latitude for the committee if it was not directly tied to council.
It's excellent. He's getting involved. Any other comments, Councillor Bulmer?
Just to clarify, I don't know if it's in the motion, but there was a question raised about whether our appointee would be a member or just an observer. I think of myself, I'm appointed by council to be our member on the Farm Safety Committee and on the Safe Communities, so.
The motion does say member.
Does it say member? Perfect.
does.
Then, yeah, good. I'd support that.
Any other comments? Councillor Gordon? Councillor Roth?
No.
No? All in favor? Carried. Committee. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Goyette, seconded by Councillor Spoulos. The council receives the presentation. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Is he here? I'll invite Jeff McKay down to the table now, please. Sorry, I thought that was.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, just make sure you speak into the microphone so that the gallery can hear you as well.
Okay. You hear me there? Telecommunications has been identified by our federal government as the enabler for social and economic development and preservation of health and safety for our entire population. Recent rebranding of Industry Canada to ISED recognized the importance of technology innovation in providing access to essential mobile broadband to all citizens. In order to ensure timely and orderly development of this essential service, the jurisdiction for approval of siting is vested strictly with federal government through ISED and related federal agencies and has been.
Mr. McKay, can I just ask you to stop for one quick second? We're going to invite the people that are in the hall into the front row. Just to make sure that presentation. Come on in. I don't know how many more are out there. Come on in, people. There's lots of seats. Is that everyone? Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. It's said that today greater than 95% of all emergency calls where life-threatening events have occurred are made on mobile networks. These are calls where minutes can make the difference between life or death, and not having the necessary infrastructure to allow this is part of the reason this is a federal mandate under the Telecommunications Act. In addition to the general public urban issues of connectivity are unique challenges to the provision of services to agribusiness and commercial activity conducted in agriculture-zoned areas, where home-based farms must compete and remain competitive to remain viable and relevant, and all agricultural equipment, like every other piece of technology in our lives, is transitioning to connected devices in the Internet of Things. You just reviewed one proponent's plan to address agriculture zone areas for their subscribers. Each of the carriers has a subscriber base facing similar issues in deployment. Most navigable equipment, from vehicles to combines to transport, will have transitioned to fully autonomous within only a few years. Each and every new vehicle on the road will be receiving and transmitting some 50 terabytes of wireless data a year in the immediate proximity of humans. It's said 19 models of General Motors vehicles by 2024 will not have a steering wheel. Our world has changed. As technology has advanced from analog to digital systems, from GSM, UMTS to 2G, 3G, LTE, 4G, and now on to 5G and the Internet of Things, coverage radii have decreased such that transmission facilities need to be much closer to the subscriber base than historically evidenced. Where analog towers of days past could be situated 10 kilometers or more to handle analog calls, today's FaceTime calls between grandparents and grandchildren are routed through facilities on average less than 800 meters away. An emergency call reporting a stroke, accident, fire, or heart attack is routed by mobile through a facility within a couple of hundred meters. In a civil society, life and death, together with social and economic development of the population in totality, cannot take a back seat to the wishes and perceptions of few. The perceptions will change, and they have continuously changed for over 100 years as we've deployed wireless communications for AM, FM, TV, remote radios, baby monitors, Wi-Fi, and mobile calling. 9 out of 10 installed devices on a subscriber account are now wireless, and the government and public demand these services. The economic and technical viability of these new sites depends critically on analysis and correction of coverage deficiencies. So the facilities are doing what they need to do. As the telecommunications networks of providers have matured over the last 35 years, they now must focus on densification of these networks to bring the towers much closer to the unaddressed subscriber base. And that will inevitably put the carrier's technical requirements at odds with a greater number of local residents who have concerns, whether relevant or not, whether perceived or real. In many cases, this now puts a large number of defined local residents within the stipulated direct notice radius. In the site before council, it does not. The site as proposed complies with all tenets of good siting practices defined by governing regulation and well-developed industry practice. Extensive efforts have been conducted by the proponent to address and resolve each and every issue it's required to address. It cannot be held to a standard of resolving all issues to the satisfaction of all members of the public on their terms. That's recognized as impossible and purports to regulate a federal undertaking. The defined and governing protocol must apply uniformly against all proponents. Proponents' duty is not one of ensuring that everybody will be happy, unfortunately. There are trade-offs necessary in order to meet the technical coverage requirements. Even in the case the proponent cannot comply with all siting guidelines, the proponent's duty is to complete the process by employing all factors of the evidenced local environment to address issues of concern to the best of its ability, while still respecting the coverage requirements. In our 35-plus years of siting telecommunication facilities through our firm and our previously associated sister firm, we can attest that this site does not demonstrate relevance of public issues of heightened concern due to failure in the siting practice, and our conclusion that the proponent has selected the site which best addresses the coverage requirement and mitigates factors of public concern to the greatest extent possible within its ability. Township staff further concluded the applicant had satisfied the requirement of the consultation process. The proponent addressed a further request from council that it adequately demonstrate with substantiating documentation why it could not locate its facility in the original or expanded search area, and did so with precise coverage propagation data and extensively detailed report that supported its conclusion. On infrequent occasion, sites will experience organized public replies that include substantially repetitive claims from distant residents. This is the case here. Of 13 public respondents, only one of which has a residence that falls within the defined direct public consultation radius as impacted, with the impact zone established by the federal government. It's been demonstrated by extensive study and response that factors of concerns for distant residents have been minimized to the extent possible. It's impossible to make a tower invisible, but visibility, health, and property value concerns diminish rapidly to insignificant with different distance from the facility. This is how and why the 3 times tower height consultation radius is used as the industry standard to determine zones of impact. It's unfortunate this application has polarized neighbors. Our landlord understandably feels vilified when in fact he was the one that took his place in civil society to be a host for the public good at a location that best suited the local environment. And because of this, someone's mother or child's life may be saved. Someone else's farm business may join the ranks of those in society that are enabled to grow and compete in a rapidly changing world. Someone else's property will not be overlooked by buyers because there's no mobile connectivity. And someone else's children will have the benefit of learning not provided by an old copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica. The matter before council today doesn't include council's determination of sites acceptable or not by any means of testing against Planning Act, site plan control, zoning bylaws, or otherwise valid municipal provincial legislation, as this is ultra vires the township's authority and jurisdiction. The matter before council strictly requests that council concur the proponents followed the procedural guidelines for municipal and public consultation as stipulated in the governing protocol, which is the CPC 2-0-03, in particular Section 4, in order they may now move on to engagement of ISED in making a determination whether the site may move forward. In this respect, council's role is to determine whether the communication report provided by the proponent in response to council's previous request is satisfactory. It was certainly a valid request that we provide and do that. If so, council will be issuing the concurrence report to Industry Canada. So just for 1 minute, the issue as it relates to being across the Hanlon to the east is that the way these towers are constructed, First of all, they have to meet the coverage gap. They have to address the coverage gap that's there. A tower is a sectorized device in that each antenna covers a 120-degree arc. So if you have 120 degree, 240, 360. The problem with being across the road, and you've seen the coverage plots, that we already have coverage in that area for the subscribers that are there. The 0-degree sector points directly over an area of 2.5 kilometers long where we have solid, continuous, adequate coverage. To the north, the 120-degree sector points directly over nothing but vacant, undeveloped, and no immediate plans to develop land where there are no subscribers. And the 240-degree sector points directly over an area where there are no subscribers as of yet, potentially developing, but already coverage that covers that area. So what happens is out of 3 sectors on an antenna over there, we don't have one working. We don't have one that meets the coverage objective. All 3 of those sectors are wasted in that area. And that area also overlaps on our future tower, which is going to address the coverage area in that area that develops down to Maltby, with our tower northwest of Gordon and Maltby. The coverage plots, and I hope you are able to understand them, the coverage plots say that this tower needs to be right where it is. And to give you some perspective in that, and we've analyzed it in great detail, we have 20 meters plus or minus east or west. We have 50 meters maybe north, and we have nothing south because we have a provincially significant wetland below that. There is no other location in this area that addresses that coverage gap in a way that that tower is financially, economically viable and meets the coverage objective. And that's kind of it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spoulos?
I have difficulty with the inconsistencies between your original justification report and the report you prepared for us. I hear what you're saying in terms of need for service and all that sort of thing, all good words. And to me, we're not against towers. I personally have difficulty with the location of the tower you selected. In the original justification report, you started by having a circle in the industrial area. You went through looking at specifically roofs, existing towers, and then right away you shifted from looking at that because you couldn't find anything suitable. You said, well, there's nothing available in that area. We did a spiral check, and the property that you currently have is the one that you want to go on. And yet now in the report you provided to us just now, you identify 2 sites within an industrial area that are suitable, physically suitable. And yet you did not comment on that in the original justification. Then you start using the argument that these sites are not appropriate because we have overlap of the signals, or of the coverage area rather. And if I look at the location of the tower that you're proposing, and I look at the coverage plots you provided in the original justification report, I can make the argument that you have overlaps with the towers as well. You're projecting straight out. You have overlaps on either side. So the argument for you, whether it's from that, it's not appropriate from that side, but it's appropriate from that side, it doesn't wash with me. The second part is your justification report talks about an 800 megahertz band. The justification report shows a big gap for the 850 megahertz band. And yet this other report you put together, there's no discussion on the 850 megahertz band. And my argument is that 850 megahertz band could be served by something on the other side as well. So we can look at the overlapping coverage from on the various plots, but I don't want to waste the rest of council's time. So I really have a concern. Then you talk about the Candidate 5, the McHenry property. You talk about the area is fully covered by existing signal density levels. Well, I go back to the original justification report. There is no 850 band megahertz coverage in that report. So I see all these inconsistencies, and I'm saying, well, what's going on? Then the last thing is you have a detailed statement in there on the process that you will be using to select a site. And I quote, one of the statements you make is the landlord must be a willing participant to enter the lease for the proponent site/compound. We're aware that there's a litigation here. It's none of our business, it's between you and them, but that's something that you and them have to resolve, but I think that's a statement that Industry Canada has to be, an issue that Industry Canada has to be aware of. So I spoke, I didn't ask any questions deliberately, so I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the people.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Spillis. Councillor Roth?
I have no questions.
Councillor Bulmer?
Well, I don't disagree completely with Councillor Sapoulis on some of those questions, but I would like to ask some clarifying, because what I understood from when you spoke last time and what you provided us this time, I just want to make sure I clarify my understanding, is that the reason that some of these inconsistencies may exist between the initial documents and the circle and the plots you provided us is one was a desktop study done from afar, and one was what you measured actually on the ground, and that would lead to some of these discrepancies. Or my background is telecommunications, so I do understand what he's talking about with that shouldn't be a discrepancy when it comes to the bands that you expect to find. You should be well aware of that before you get on site. So perhaps you can answer that.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. The issue is that it's a desktop pilot that says, here's where we need to fix the coverage gap. That search map in about, and I carry 150 of these sites at any one time, with 30 of them in municipal consultations, not my first rodeo. About 3% of our sites, we run into a situation where the original search area doesn't meet the coverage. So we don't know that until, so there's 3,700 sites on the books over the next 2 years for Rogers. Nobody could handle the staff to go out there and pre-look at the coverage for each of these sites, because when they do a coverage study, they have to enter the technology, they have to enter which band which carrier band they're using, 850, 1200, 2100. They look at all of those things in the plots, and there will be about 7 different technologies on that tower when it's done. When the initial candidates, when we go out and look at initial candidates, we say, where do we have rooftops, where do we have towers, what can we use? We're searching in the search ring. When we find our best candidate in that area, in this case it was the TDL, the RBI facility, that candidate goes into RF. At that point, RF generates the local area coverage plots, which include what's termed the entire combined local environment. At that point in time, they said, we got a problem. That coverage doesn't work in that area. That's an isolated thing. Like I say, about 3% of cases we run into that. More often than that, we will run into a situation where the coverage area is here. There are no opportunities whatsoever to site, no willing landlords, nothing that meets siting guidelines, and we have absolutely no candidates. In that case, we must then step back and look at relocating the search ring where we have a commercial opportunity. And if we can find a match on that, where maybe we're getting 2 out of 3 sectors working and we're hitting an 80% or 85% number on throughput, we can still justify that case in some cases based on subscriber density. In this case, that wasn't the issue. We had no opportunities that would work on the east side of Hamilton. I have to correct that. None. We had opportunities that there were commercial willing hosts, but that doesn't make a site. So RBI in particular was a willing host to go through the process of doing either a rooftop or mounting in their front yard or mounting in the backyard. The Southgate Business Park, there were no opportunities, no civil opportunities. The space wasn't there. The land is designated as stormwater under OREGs. In the one side, there's no room on the buffer strip. There's no room on the side of the property. MGS is a closed facility. That tower is too small. Sector 1 points into an area of coverage that we're fully covered. Sector 2 points to absolutely nothing. And we're at 40 meters. We can't get anything covered. So to address the comment made about the coverage overlap, it's not as simple as saying, here's a circle, here's a circle, here's a circle. It's a very complex thing that what happens is that with about a less than a 1 kilometer radius for good coverage, we can't be on that side of the road and cover what we need to cover on the other side, which is the whole block that we demonstrate an obvious void. The big void is on the west side of Hanlon. What we can do from the west side of Hanlon with the height that we have is we can supplement all the coverage that we need in that strip on Hanlon to increase coverage to give redundancy without casting wasted signal over nothing. So we can fix, we can address future issues as new platforms are added to this from the chosen location. We can't from the Hanlon. So the Hanlon has got interference with the Gordon Tower coming up from the bottom, that we will not be able to address that without a tower over in that location by a tower in this location, and that's going to mean 2 sector coverage overlap on both towers. So that sterilizes both sites by being on that side. On the west side of Hanlon, we address 100% of the coverage requirement.
Right, sorry, we got that already, so I was just looking to address that. I had the similar question, more related to...
So, and
Hang on.
on the bands?
Hang on. Let the
It's
council
more
finish.
related to the difference between the desktop analysis that got you to the circle, because that was where my concern was last time, and that's why I requested the written confirmation of the things you said here. So
Yeah, so
I think I've got that confirmed, that it is just, the discrepancy comes from refining those two. What you saw from the desktop was of a certain scale and was based on information from the towers and maybe user feedback, but then you go and you proof on site to do these RF maps these plots are done on the ground.
that's correct. That's correct. So, and to give you an idea of the process.
We don't need a long
Okay,
explanation.
no,
of the
I can
process
do it really
and
quickly.
coverage.
Yes, was fine.
The search map is always a standard inclusion in the justification report. Where we failed to make it clear was that the search map, we don't get an opportunity to go back and revise a search map and get a new one printed when they say, oh, that's not going to work. What we get is a coverage gap analysis. So the coverage gap analysis replaces that search map. That's where procedurally it's been misunderstood.
Councilor Ballmer, do you have?
Yeah, I have a
questions?
question of the mayor. We'll have an opportunity to discuss, if I have any questions regarding the report or any other information,
We're going to deal with it right after this.
but with the report, not...
Yes, correct.
Okay, super, then that's enough, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ballmer. Councilor Goyda?
Thank you. I guess at the end of the day, I think we all understand that the decision is not up to us here at council to decide whether this is the location that it's going to go or whether it's not. And our role really is to report on whether Rogers has fulfilled all of the requirements and then completed the application properly, which they have. But as council members, it's also our job to be the voice of our residents. And I have to say that it's difficult to understand how we had initially this search ring that was established. And there's a site in that site ring, in that initial ring, that can and was willing to accommodate the tower. But then somehow suddenly it's discovered that that location in that search ring doesn't have adequate coverage. So then the search ring is just sort of moved over so that the one location where nobody wants it to be is the only location it can go. And I know you've explained that just now, that it's a desktop versus an on-site inspection, but I think that process of getting there, it just doesn't come across as a very transparent way of doing business. And I think that, you know, that process allows people to not trust the findings at hand. Because they're being told one thing and then they're being told something else. And I think that's where a lot of maybe the contention is coming from. I guess, I don't know if you can answer this question, but if the site that we're talking about right now wasn't willing to accommodate this tower, what would the next steps be? Would you go back to looking at that TDL site, or would you just not put up a tower at all? Or what would the next option be if this site wasn't an option?
Can't make the TDL site work. I can't, and that would be, and I know our landlord is in a very difficult position right now. He's trying to be a good neighbor, and we'd love to be able to find another option. We have no other option on that side of the road, so that the coverage plot in that one in particular shows that entire complex completely covered in existing highest level coverage.
I believe the
could
councilor's
possibly
question
have.
was if this site does not go forward,
So-
what are the next steps?
We're sterilized. We're sterilized, so it's impasse is our only option from here. From a network building perspective, is that we will go to impasse with ISED, and ISED will make the call. We have no, and I have exhausted it. I really put everything I possibly can into this. We have no other site, particularly in the area that we have established the site, because it's sterilized.
We're going to deal with your report, so I'm sure you'll get more time to
Okay.
comments. Do you have any other
That's all the questions I had.
I have some questions for you. You make reference that some of the sites are excluded due to the fact that they're vacant land, correct?
Yes, yes.
So right now, the South End Business Park is building out. How many of these towers do you have on the go? I think you mentioned in the hundreds? To be
I
proposed?
cover everything from North Bay to
How many do you
Niagara
have on the
Falls.
go right now?
Right now, I have
personally.
30 in municipal, and I have 132 sites in the open portfolio.
So why is there such a fire under this tower for Guelph? If we have an industrial area that's building out that could lead to potential sites for a tower that wouldn't upset the community, why can't you go build the other 129 and come back when there's more opportunities in the industrial area? That's my question.
There's two parts to that, is we are building those other sites when they're ready to build. So when the subscribers are there, we build. And those are already planned for. There'll be another tower that I'm aware of at Gordon and Maltby, and another one further north of that to develop, to handle Southgate as it develops. We have no other options to deal with this site.
Okay.
So that whole block, there'll be no tower, there'll be no internet, there'll be no broadband, there'll be no fiber brought in there, there'll be no nothing. It'll be a dead zone. And we wrap up and move on.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we're going to receive your delegation, and then we're going to deal with the reports. So I'll just ask you to stay there, and then I'll determine whether, our councilors will determine whether they want to ask you questions during the report, okay? Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spoulos. The council receives a presentation by Jeff McKay with respect to report PD 2019-007 TC 01-19 telecommunication application file. Is this the right one? Yeah. File TC 01-2019 A12/Rogers. All in favor? Carried. Okay. And then, council, we're going to skip down to report PD 2019-007. And we'll discuss this. So, Councillor Spoulos, you have a motion?
Yes, I have a motion, and my motion reads as follows. Whereas there are inconsistencies between the original justification report and the site selection candidate review report with respect to availability of candidate sites within the original search area, whereas the proposed site as well as sites in the original search area will have overlapping areas of coverage, And whereas the site selection candidate review report is silent on the coverage area for the 850 megahertz band, and the original justification report clearly identifies a lack of proper coverage which likely could be provided by a site in the original search area. Therefore, it be resolved that council is not in support of locating the tower at LE Farms Limited, et cetera, and the staff be requested to send a letter of non-concurrence to Industry Canada, and that the foregoing be forwarded to MP Chong. And with respect to this issue of litigation, I ask that the covering letter that forwards the report just indicate that this is under litigation. As simple as just we'll say it, and I don't want to put in a motion.
Okay, you don't want to put in a motion?
No, I'd rather have it as a simple thing that
Okay.
it's done in the letter, it's up front.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Roth? And Councillor Roth, you can start with comments.
I support that motion.
Okay. Councillor Bulmer?
I'm torn on it. When I read our staff report and I reviewed the information we got to address that inconsistencies, when I consider our obligation is whether or not they followed the process, whether we like the answers or not, I struggle with the idea of suggesting non-concurrence. I do support the idea of including the concern regarding a non-willing host, though. I guess I'm sort of a little bit, I'd like to be a little more upfront about the non-willing host issue, because they're a resident just like anyone else, and I want to make sure their interests are represented well. I mean, I would support sending a concurrence letter, because I believe the applicant has addressed those inconsistencies, notwithstanding the fact that I still think when we saw the first notice that the tower was going to be at Southgate and Clare, that was way off the mark. And the circle, and the process does create a lot of, as Councillor Goyda suggested, it creates a lot of distrust when things shift and change. But I've been satisfied by the answers I've received as to why those differences occur. I look at to be similar to when we have mapping that needs to be ground-proofed. A lot of mapping and things are done from aerial photographs, and then they need to be proofed on the ground. So I see this as similar. So I'm not sure I could support sending a non-concurrence letter, since our staff have already determined that they have concurred with the process or followed the process. But if I were to do that, I'd want to make sure right up front that it was made clear that that the government understands it's with a currently non-willing host. So those would be my comments.
Councillor Goyda?
I'm torn as well, because I know that the proponent has fulfilled the requirements as it relates to process, and that staff has said that they agree with that. But I do hear what you're saying. I don't feel like I have a good enough understanding of the megahertz and what those all mean to know if that justifies non-concurrence or not. But I believe I would support the motion.
Yes, I'd like to comment on Councillor Bulmer's. Councillor Bulmer, we heard from the proponent verbally. We have before us 2 written documents. That's all I'm going by, is the written word. In the end, that's all that everybody has to look at and make a decision on. That's all I'm basing it is on the 2 sets of documents. I can understand you try to clarify it. It would have been nice if that would have been clarified in the other report. It was not. And I'm speaking factually. There appears to be inconsistencies. I think you understand there are inconsistencies. There is a clarification for that, but that's not in the report, in either report.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, I don't disagree, but I am concerned that we're getting, this is getting into a technical area as opposed to a process area. And I guess how I read we're supposed to be concurring that the process was followed.
Okay.
Whether we agree or disagree with the conclusions they came to after going through the process, And you know, our hands are tied. I'm acknowledging through that, you know, I'm maybe not comfortable with our hands. That's the position we've been given, and that's just how I'm interpreting it, so.
And you're saying the process, well, the process clearly laid out in the justification report. We're going to look in the circle area. Well,
Right.
there's nothing here, so let's widen out. Well, the second report says, well, there are candidate sites.
Yes.
So it's you know, it's not consistent. I find that difficult to accept, and as Councillor Goyda says, the fact that it's not a transparent process, it's not clear in everybody's mind. It's not clear in my mind. I asked the question, I heard the verbal comments. Unfortunately, time has run out, and we have to respond, and the process, to my mind, was not followed. They identified a search ring. They said clearly there's nothing available within that search ring, and they went outside. Well, in fact, there was. They could have said in the original justification report, yes, we identified some sites, but here are the plots associated with those sites that they do not meet the requirements. Simple as that. And it was not said.
It's interesting, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Last comment. No?
I think Councillor Sapoulis has made me think of a different way to look at this, which is always a valuable thing to be able to do. So if I were to understand how you would have preferred the process to run into addressing my concern regarding the process, had there have been an inability to find something in the initial search ring, and this goes to Councillor Goyda's point as well, had there have been no ability to find something in the original search ring, then it should have been stopped and a new search, and then start the process again.
Absolutely.
And then-
Absolutely. And
But this is-
rather than trying to put a bandage on a wound and another bandage and another bandage.
No, and I understand. So,
And that's my concern. It's the inconsistency with this report.
and then is that maybe staff can address that question then my question would be, is that process determined by the applicant, or is that process, as I agree with the process you're suggesting, would have been far more clear and addressed any misconceptions or mistrust among the residents, because, okay, we couldn't find anything in here, so now we're going to search here and keep having an identified search ring until they find something. I agree would be possibly be a much better process. I believe it was staff that wrote the report. Maybe could I answer the question, is it appropriate to hold the applicant responsible for a process they didn't create but are following? And or are they only accountable for the process that they're accountable to?
So, based on our understanding, they're accountable to the process set out by Industry Canada, which this proponent did follow. So, from our understanding, he did follow the appropriate process. I don't know if that answers the questions exactly, but.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing to follow up with Councillor Goyda's question about what happens if Council does decide to send a letter of non-concurrence, which is the current motion on the table. In speaking with Industry Canada, and as noted by the Rogers representative, if we do send a letter of non-concurrence, then Industry Canada calls it an impasse process, meaning that we cannot come to a resolution. And then the proponent, Rogers, can go to Industry Canada and declare it an impasse, at which point Industry Canada will work with us and with the proponent to see if they can come to a resolution to the issues identified. And however, if at the end of that process no resolution is made, then the minister will make the decision whether this goes ahead. So just so Council knows that that's the process that would be followed.
Councillor Bumper?
So in that process, would we possibly then, for us to be able to understand if what we're being told is accurate or not, we'd probably have to retain a consultant to interpret the drawings and determine whether the technical information we're receiving regarding the appropriateness of the site.
So this is, you mean, as part of the impasse process? I think it would be up to each municipality. We, in the time I've been here and even prior to that, have not reached that point yet with any of our providers. So we certainly are in uncharted territory. It would be up to council at that point, how we proceed.
Answer. As far as I'm concerned, Councilor Bowman, we don't have the expertise, and I really don't want to pay for the expertise. I'm looking at this from a simple point of view, and my motions are structured such that it's a simple reading of both reports, and this is what I see. I didn't want to get into the details of 207 degrees of coverage and rotating towers to maximize, minimize. I would not retain a expert. I would just say this is the way council saw it, this is the way the reports were written, and this is the way council interpreted those reports. Simple as that.
Okay. All right, so Councillor Roth, you still in favor of the motion?
I am.
Councillor Goyda?
Yes.
Councillor Spools? Or you,
Okay, I just wanted to make clear the point about the current owner not being in favor. Councillor Bowman would like that as part of the motion. My suggestion was to be included in the report.
Okay.
So,
he's proposing a friendly amendment. Are you declining it?
I'd like staff to comment on that.
When staff reviewed the notice of motion earlier today, we felt it was prudent to make the notice of motion to work it around the issues at hand and to leave the litigation proponent out of it as it's a private matter. And we advised Councillor Spools that we could certainly, at the direction of council, bring awareness to it to Industry Canada through our cover letter. However, it is up to council discretion. So if you did want to add that to the notice of motion, that is something you may do.
I would prefer to leave it out, just on the cover letter, as we don't know what stage of litigation, if at all, you know.
Exactly.
So it's
You prefer to have it in the cover letter?
Cover letter, correct.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
Fair
I
enough.
just thought we should put it in the resolution that we're directing staff to do that, but that's okay.
Oh, I see
do you
what
want the
you're-
resolution to say, to provide a cover letter to?
There's
Just to indicate that it goes with the,
We can just add to the minutes, because I think I'm getting general consensus amongst council here, so I can just put in the minutes that by general consensus, staff was directed to include that in the cover letter.
perhaps we can deal with that as a separate, that's fine. I just want to make sure it's recorded somewhere so it,
We need just as amended on the end of that, or anything? Oh, sorry, on this one. Can you get him to sign that? Councillor Roth.
Councillor Roth.
Just carried, the non-concurrence. Okay, so I'll just call all in favor, to see if show of hands. Okay. All opposed? Okay. Okay. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spools, the report PD 2019-007 regarding telecommunication application file TC 01-2019-812/ROG Rogers Site C6798 leased from LEL Farms Limited, Concession 4, Part Lot 20, Parts 2 to 3, municipally known as 4638 Side Road 20 North, be received. All in favor? Carried. Now, I believe we're at Amanda for the mini lakes.
No, we have one more
Still one more
delegation.
delegation.
Oh, gosh.
So we're at.
Yeah, that's on the amended agenda.
Or Amanda.
Invite Mark and Mary down for their final delegation. Or Judy? Judy and Mary? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
As you know, I just asked if there's multiple people at the table, just try to alternate the microphone so that people in the gallery can hear the conversation as well.
Sure.
And you can start whenever you're ready. You need another chair?
It's okay, I'll stand.
Sorry, John, sorry.
We'll get one.
I'm not going to be speaking in Mary's voice.
Okay. So we as a working group wanted to come up here and thank council for their commitment to the walking trail established in the 29 year at Fox Run Drive. We understand the timelines for this were very tight and for such a detailed project, and are pleased to see that the council and staff have managed to keep us on schedule so far. As a community, this resource is so important to the families of the Fox Run Estates. Having an accessible walking trail in a park that is maintained is vitally important to all members of our community. As you may recall, the survey results from the open house indicated that 41 out of 51 homes sought maintained park as large as large areas of untended grasses could represent health concerns for children, pets, and residents in the community. The community as a whole expressed their desire to keep the area free of ground nesting bees, yellow jackets, and ticks, etc., for various health reasons. The Fox Run Drive estates are nestled amongst surrounding protected forests and fallow farmers' fields, and the community itself has many gardens surrounding it. We look forward to the public information meeting on the 22nd of July and have encouraged all the residents of the Fox Run Drive estates to attend, so this process can continue to move forward in supporting the community and families with a park that we can use for gatherings, events, and on a daily basis. Again, we're here today to thank council for the support, and we would like to express our deep gratitude to the mayor, council, and staff for your commitment and hard work in supporting our community.
Oh, excellent. It's always nice to have somebody come and thank us for our hard work. We appreciate it. We'll just have you stay for a few moments while I just go around the council horseshoe to see if there's any comments. Councillor Spools.
I don't have any questions. As far as I'm concerned, nobody's changed the service standard for the mowing the lawns, and as far as I'm concerned, it's going to stay the same unless it comes through the residents and there's a request by the residents.
I think there's some communications regarding that we'll maybe deal with as soon as we're
Sure,
going
yeah,
around. We'll
yeah,
just
yeah.
talk about it quickly. Councillor Roth.
Yes, thank you. I agree, and we'll be at the public meeting Monday night anyway, so we'll hear any concerns there are and take the evaluation from that.
Councillor Bulmer.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Councillor Sapoulis. I think they're staying the course, and look forward to hearing what everybody has to say at the public meeting Monday night. See when we finally have a chance to discuss the overall plan for the path and everything. See what everybody says. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to say thank you. That's always really nice. I really have no questions. I'm glad to hear that you are trying to get as many people to come as possible to the public meeting, because we always get really good ideas and better feedback the more people that are there. So I look forward to hearing from what you have to say on that night as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just echo it again, that thank you for coming down and being positive, and we look forward to seeing you at the public information meeting and get some feedback.
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Spoolis, seconded by Councillor Goyda. Councillor receives a presentation by Judith Stoffman, Mary Christidis, and Barbara Redmond with respect to Fox Run and vegetation management. All in favor? Okay, carried. I'd like to just go to communications and just deal with the July 4th letter, revegetation management in Fox Run. That way, if these individuals were wanting to go home to their families, I'm on page 296. Does everybody see that? So I'll just open up if there's any comments or questions.
I just like to move that we receive it.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? Any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of receiving it? Thank you. All right. Now, are we on to Amanda? Okay, so we're going to go to communications. It's the second one for the Mini Lakes Water System Annual Monitoring Report prepared by Amanda Pepping, GM Blue Pen. Let me see where. Do we have any questions or comments on that one? If you have questions for Amanda, I can invite her down to the table.
I don't have any questions. I think the report was well written. It explains the issues and explains the concerns very well.
Okay. Any other questions?
Councillor Sapoulis mentioned earlier that you had a motion on to this regard.
I had a motion taking all three into account rather than having one separately. I can do one for each one, but
Oh, I see.
It's all to do with this particular
Yeah, okay.
71A, 71B, 71C.
Yeah, yeah.
Rather just do it all at once.
Okay, so that can wait. Councillor Bulmer?
Well, then, if I could, if Amanda's here, or you said there's engineers here?
Yes.
I would have one process question, if I could, then.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just a second. All right. Thank you. She's available to you.
Thank you very much. Just going back to my comments earlier regarding the replacement, if I understand correctly, the association has decided to replace the rotating batch reactor contactor, with a sequencing batch reactor, SBR? Is that what that's the correct term, isn't it?
Rotating biological contactor and sequencing batch reactor.
Oh, okay. I did read that correctly. They are they're moving ahead with replacing it.
That was not entirely my understanding. So there was a bit of a high-level study done by Ontario Clean Water Agency where they did look at some options, but they also made reference to doing, I believe they called it a performance assessment and optimization study, where they're actually going to look at, a more detailed study to look at optimizing the existing plant before they make a decision to replace the facility.
I guess because I thought I read something in there that suggested the condominium board had chosen the SBR as the replacement technology. So.
There was some terminology in there to that effect. It is my understanding that they're doing a more comprehensive study before they make a final decision.
Okay.
That study was to be available shortly, according to the.
All right. So I guess then my question would be premature. It was going to be that if they choose to replace it, will we have an opportunity to comment on the parameters for the new C of A as part of that replacement process? I guess.
If they chose to go that route, I would presume that you would get an opportunity to provide input to that.
Super, because we still remain as the default owner.
You do still have a responsibility agreement.
Right.
With that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. It helps me understand where we are. Appreciate that.
While we have you down here, we were thinking of just discussing 7A, B. Well, the A is from Aqua, but then we have B and C that you've reviewed. So if council has any other questions regarding all of the reports by Amanda, I think it would be a good opportunity just to discuss that. And Councilor Rowe?
Yeah, on your recommendations, is there a time frame when we get answers on those? Or the problems with this system seem to be increasing every report we get, and a lot of these are repetitious. And is there any way we can set a timeline for some answers?
You can certainly ask. It was my understanding that the report, the comprehensive performance assessment report, was fairly imminent. At least that was the way they alluded to it in their report. Maybe we could issue some correspondence following up with them on that. But I did think that getting the results of that study would hopefully give some answers for a path forward.
Okay, I just think it's something we have to stay on top of. Mm-hmm. I don't want to end up owning this system.
Mm-hmm. No. Councilor Bomer? Do you have any other?
Oh, thank you. I think I had my questions addressed already. Thank you.
Councilor Goyda?
I had a question about in the water system. It talks about this HPC, and I don't really know what that is. I'm wondering if you can explain, it's showing that there's a detection of that, and is that something that's of concern or not really?
I would say it's not of significant concern. So HPC stands for heterotrophic plate count. It's just a kind of a background bacteria. So it's really just an indicator parameter. So E. coli is really the one that you're concerned about. There's a zero tolerance for that. For the HPC, if that shows up and trends in it change, it could be an indication of something, maybe something changing in the system. But based on the results that I saw, I thought it was fairly typical and nothing to be concerned about, at least at this time.
Okay. The summary of recommendations does say that close monitoring of that HPC level should be done, but it doesn't say in the recommendations that it says in the body that it should be like a water main flushing should take place, but it doesn't say it in the recommendations. So is that something that as council we should be asking specifically for?
In hindsight, I should have documented that in the recommendations section. I believe they were planning to proceed with that anyways. Could already be done. But yes, it is something that I should have noted in the recommendation.
And that's okay. I just wanted to clarify if that's something. in terms of the wastewater system, I agree that perhaps we should be putting some timeframes on some of these recommendations, and specifically, like the comprehensive performance evaluation optimization study. It sounds like it's in the works, but I mean, as that's in the works, this system seems to continually be getting worse and worse. And so I think the sooner they get a handle on that, the sooner we can put an action plan in place. And so I don't know if that's something that we can do, but I think we should probably put some time frame parameters on that. And I also just wanted to ask about the chemical storage requirements. And it talks about in there that it's out of compliance, the chemical storage. And if I'm reading it right, it looks like it has been out of compliance since 2016. So it doesn't sound like there's a real sense of urgency here that anything is being done.
It being out of compliance since 2016 is because that's when the amended ECA was received. So the amended ECA included those changes, and they have not implemented it yet. I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe that there's a kind of an expiration date put on it in accordance in the terms of the ECA. I do actually have it here, but I won't dig through it. But I believe that they do put there's a limit to if it hasn't been constructed within a certain period of time, then there is sort of an expiration date on that. So it is something that they should be proceeding with, and I believe they are planning to proceed with it. It has been noted by them as an outstanding issue that needs to be addressed.
Okay. And not really a question, but again, when I look at the pictures of the sludge and the sediment pooling there, it makes me think that this flushing and this camera inspection, like that needs to happen right now. And I don't know if that's a reasonable request to make, and I don't know if council would agree that we should be asking for those things to be done sort of immediately, but those would be my comments on that.
I also have some questions. Have they taken simple measures so it says the NO3 concentrations have been above limit during the 7 to 12 effluent quality sampling events. And I'm sure everybody in their kitchen sink has an aerator. Are they putting notices out to their residents that these are our problems? Take off the aerator so we can lower the amount of dissolved oxygen to facilitate this septic system, being in compliance. Do they have conversations with the residents, or?
I'm not aware of that. I can't speak to that. I will say that something that's lacking in some of the data that we received, because the ministry only mandates effluent sampling, and so historically we've not had the raw and intermittent data, but it does seem that they've recognized that as a bit of a deficiency and have just recently implemented some additional sampling and some raw water sampling. So hopefully maybe in subsequent reports, if we can receive some of that data, we could actually see what is it coming into the plant, because it is, the numbers that we're seeing in the effluent are substantially higher than we would expect to see in raw sewage. So it would be, right now we can't confirm where that's coming from. Is it coming in that way? Is it being introduced at some point through the system? So we can't make that determination right now, but hopefully moving forward as we get some additional data, then that may shed some light onto how and why it is like that.
How many more quarters do they have of being not in compliance until they're considered not in compliance?
They are not in compliance right now, and no, but I mean the system is like the ministry is responsible for that system. So as to when the ministry would ever comment or insert themselves into that, I can't comment. I know previously non-compliance events are not new. And I'm unaware of the ministry kind of getting involved up until now. Now that said, kind of things are at, I think, unprecedented levels. There should be a new quarter report out anytime. It'll be interesting to see what that shows. Now the first quarter 2019 report, the trend was continuing.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Roth. I don't want to own this system. Do you have some more comments, Councillor Spillis?
Yes. Your reports sort of summarize what their report said. And Appendix E of their report talks about a lot of do's and don'ts type of thing and timing of what they should be doing, such as like a raw sewage, complete water sewage scans, start immediately within 1 month of sampling. and then, say, change those automatically, immediately type of thing. Are you in support of those timelines suggested in there?
I would have to review all of them, but generally, I would say yes, those sound like reasonable timeframes.
Well, I was planning to make a motion with respect to resending on your recommendations, your two, the water and the sewage recommendations, as well as this table, and asking them to acknowledge they received the letter and put together a schedule of when they plan to undertake all these activities. And we would like to hear that, I was going to suggest within 90 days.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Goyda? We'll go around. Councillor Roth?
Sure.
Councillor Palmer?
Is 90 days fast enough? I mean,
I'm looking at quarters, this is a quarterly
Yeah.
report, so I would assume by the next quarter, they should know what they're doing.
yeah, when I think that they've been working on this since January and they've had this report since February or March, it shouldn't be too hard for them to give us a schedule.
I'm fine if you want to change that timing to 60 days or.
Yeah.
60 days, fine, let's do 60.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm fine with that amendment.
Yeah, I agree with that. So all in favor? Carried. You're comfortable with the motion? All right. Thank you very much. So that should take us to Sorry. This is the one that Jessica has declared a pecuniary interest. We're going to move to the correspondence from Lafarge Canada with respect to the operations at the Lafarge Wellington site and ERO posting June 27th, 2019. So I'm just going to pull that up. We'll open that up for comments. Councillor Spillis.
Yes, I have three things I'd like to suggest to council. First of all, the deadline for, on the water permit is August the 9th, and I'd like to suggest we ask staff to forward a request that the MOECC, I guess, instead of issuing a 10-year permit, issues a 5-year permit, consistent with our previous statements. This is a larger volume of water than I've ever seen before, so it's a very significant amount. Second thing is I'd like to suggest is that we asked the mayor to work with the mayor of Guelph and Guelph Hermosa to come up with a united strategy for this issue and the upcoming issue of the site plan type of thing. In other words, we shouldn't be operating independently of each other. We should have a united front, somebody taking the charge and somebody saying we're going to follow in. And the third thing is I'd like to suggest that staff contact Lafarge. Since the lapse in time from when they ceased operation till now, where they're going to restart, has been significant. And I don't know whether or not the original site conditions will prevail or not. I suspect not. But I would like to ask staff to confirm that the site conditions are, if they are changed, even if they're not changed, whether or not the proponent or Lafarge will be holding public information sessions so that public as well as council can comment on the site conditions. I'm concerned things like standard things, sites, hours of operation, the location of the pit face relative to property lines, issues like that.
Okay, so that's a motion?
Well, that's what I'm going to suggest. I would like to talk and get support of council.
So we'll need a motion to discuss it.
Okay, so, you want to go along questions? or something?
Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll go around once. Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I don't have any objections to that. Whether we have any control over that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But we can ask.
Councillor Bomer?
Thank you. Yeah, I guess the only piece I have any immediate concerns would be the water taking. In the past, we've often had our hydrogeologist review these large water taking applications so that we can provide informed comments to the MOE. Regarding the site plans and the area, that's under the Area Resources Act. I don't think we're looking at any amendments to the site plans right now. Unless I missed that in there. Will be circulated.
No, we're not looking at that right now. I'm talking for the future. I want to be ahead of the wave. I don't want to be reactive.
So you-
Yeah, so I guess I'm fully supportive. I like the idea of
The comment with respect to the mayor working with
Yes,
the other mayors is
absolutely.
to do with the water and the future activities. The comment with respect to the site plan approval is, are you going to have public meetings in the future to address these?
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, the correspondence already mentioned there's going to be an open house coming up on July 24th.
To do with the water taking.
Yeah, and the Aggregate Resources Act, if there's going to be any amendments, significant amendments, there'll be a process triggered by that if any public meetings are required.
Council Bulmer, I really, given the past experience we've had with another
I agree.
in this area, I want to make sure, put it in writing to them and get a response to them in writing. I just don't want us to be blindsided by the process that was followed before.
Well, certainly. So asking the applicant to hold a public meeting prior to making any site plan amendments, that's a reasonable request. It doesn't bind them to anything.
Are you asking for the applicant to hold a public meeting before?
No,
the
I'm
site plan?
asking whether or not they will have a public meeting.
That's
On the
easy.
site plan.
With respect to any changes, or given the fact that it's been 30 years since the pit's been used, things have changed in the area. So I don't know, I looked at the Golder report. It looked like they're excavating a lot more, and I don't know if that was on the original site plan, but they excavated. Whether or not the original site plan is valid now, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the question I'm asking. Is it valid? Even if it's not, if it is still valid, can we have a public, will you have a public meeting so that re-educate the public and everybody else that this has happened?
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, I think that, again, that public meeting on Victoria Road will not just be about the water, it'll primarily be about the
It'll
water,
be
but
about the whole operation.
If that's the case, then we
Why don't we
don't
wait
need
and
it,
see?
but then I can make the motion subject to the public meeting.
sure. But I,
Because I don't think they'll have a site plan. I think they'll be talking about water.
We
yeah,
could have staff confirm with Mr. Cummings that the public information meeting coming up will be inclusive of the operations as well as of the water.
Fine, we
taking.
can do that, yeah. And if it's not, then will you have a separate meeting to deal with that? Okay, fine, I can accept that, yes.
and regarding working, I think collaborating with Guelph Massa or coordinating with Guelph Massa is very important on this. I think that's an excellent suggestion because it's a site that crosses the boundary, and I think we need to work closely with them to make sure that we're not contradicting each other. That would be, not that we're colluding, but I think we should certainly converse with them. But I would like to get some feedback on, at this stage, getting some, since this is not a zone change application, I'm not looking for a hydrogeological analysis of the application in terms of a rezoning, but just to confirm that that the stated impacts that they are proposing are as proposed, and we won't see any negative impacts to any neighboring wells that are drawing from the same aquifer that they're going to be dewatering. And if maybe a scoped analysis regarding that water taking by Mr. Denhode at Hardin Environmental might be appropriate in this case, if that was appropriate.
Okay, just 1 second. The province would conduct their own review of the hydrogeology, would they not, Councillor Bulmer?
Yes, but it's been our practice. We do the same thing with Nestle's, with the water taking permits. We've done it with most large water taking permits to date. To help prepare our comments so that we have something from doing our due diligence on behalf of any residents who have a water well in that area.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll deal with Councillor Sepoulis's motion and recommendations first.
Okay.
Then I'll come back to you
All right.
to table a motion for the hydrogeologist, okay?
Sure, yep.
Okay, so,
I was just going to comment on the,
on Councillor, well, I gotta let Councillor Goytis, oh no, she's out. So, the only thing I want to, if we comment that we want a 5-year permit, we have to qualify it. Last time we did that, and I believe it was with Dufferin Aggregates, the ministry just dismissed us because we didn't put in qualification. And whether it just be that other industries that have water taking permits are restricted to a 5-year permit, we want standardization across all water taking permits. So let's qualify it somehow.
And my qualification also is this is a large volume of water they're
Yeah.
taking.
So-
I forgot the exact numbers. but
30 million?
It's significant. that to me is a qualification itself.
So, as a friendly amendment, can we word it that we want it, permits to take water to be standardized at 5 years?
Okay,
Across all.
notice specifically noting that this specific property will be taking volumes in the order of, 30 million?
25 or 28?
29, well, all combined, just one is 29, and one is...
Yeah, 25, yeah, I'm fine with that from the amendment.
Okay. All right, do you have any comments on Councillor Spilos's? Do you have any further comments? Okay, so all in favor of that motion? Okay.
Want a seconder?
I thought I had a seconder. No? Councillor Rowe?
Second, okay.
All in favor, it's carried.
Yep.
And then we'll have Councillor Bulmer propose his motion.
Yeah, I just wanted, because of significant water taking here, and we may have some residents drawing from that shallow aquifer from the Guelph Formation there, their initial indications are that the impacts won't be more than 500 meters away. That's nice someone says that, but I think it warrants having our hydrogeologist look at the report, and just in terms of what the potential impact to neighboring wells would be, I think I'd leave it to the Grand River Conservation Authority to determine what the impact is to the river in this regard. But in terms of potential impact to neighboring wells, I think it'd be a good thing for us to ask for a scoped analysis of the hydrogeological reports to determine the potential for impacts of any neighboring wells.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify, is the intent that we get this report prior to the deadline for the permit to take water commenting and to include it with the township's comments?
So that we can comment, include any concerns as part of our comments to the MOE on the water taking permit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? You or Councillor Rowe?
I'll second it, just have a discussion on it.
Okay. All right, we'll open up for discussion. Councillor Spilos?
My original motion was to have you work in concert with the other two. And I don't want us to go out on a limb and do it ourselves, have a hydrogeologist. And if they do or not do, I think it should be a united front. We have residents, so does Guelph Formosa have residents. The wells for Guelph are located nearby. I think they have a bigger issue than the majority of the area in Puslinch. Granted, we have several residents in the area, but I think they have a bigger issue. So if they take the lead, I'm happy with that. I really don't want to have duplication of effort, all of us doing the same thing.
Councillor Rowe?
I agree. If we're going to do a joint approach, then let's make it a joint approach. And we can spend a lot of money on a hydrogeologist that isn't going to make an iota of difference to the ministry anyway, because it's them that do the permit, not us. So I can't see us spending the money to do that, because I don't think the end result is anywhere near the reward of the cost.
And that would be my concern as well, though the city of Guelph and Guelph Hermosa may not want to hire a hydrogeologist to review this. We don't know that as of yet. So I would prefer to do it as a united front, but we can't commit to a hydrogeologist being a united front right now.
I understand what you're saying. All I want is a united front. If all three of us are speaking from the same hymn book, then it's a stronger front than each one of us attacking the issue separately with our own way. I think it's important. If there's a strategy developed, great. Let's move on with it. If there's no strategy, if the strategy is no strategy, well, so be it. But I think it's got to be a united front. That's my bottom line. And there's got to be a reason for whatever approach we're taking.
And I agree with you 100%. I just want to make it clear that there was a possibility that there wouldn't be a strategy.
I don't know or not, but certainly I'm asking you to liaise with them and determine if there is a desire to provide a strategy, given that we have an issue and so do the other municipalities.
I understand your concern, Councillor Bulmer, with the residents with their wells nearby. And at this time, I hope that the Ministry of Environment will pick up any concerns with their wells. And again, once working with the City of Guelph and Mayor White, we can maybe do a combined initiative. And so right now, I'm going to call for a vote on Councillor Bulmer's motion, unless there's any further comments. No, all in favor? All opposed? That's not carried. Okay.
All right. At least
Sorry,
it was,
Councillor
at least
Palmer.
it was discussed. Hey,
Yep.
our job is to put things on the table. How they fall afterwards, that's democracy.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
So now we're going to discuss the Mill Creek pit license, 5738. Councillor Spillis, any questions or comments?
No, I don't.
Councillor?
Nope.
Okay. That's it for that. Intergovernmental affairs next. First one is the Roma Orga resolution. Any questions or comments? Don't see any. Cannabis policy update. Any questions or comments? I did notice that they took out the requirement for population, so there is potential that if somebody had the space, we might have a retail store in Puslinch if they win the lottery.
Can I move that they all be accepted as presented, and unless anybody has a comment?
Pardon me?
Can I move that they all be accepted as,
I have comments on 3 of them, so.
okay.
We'll try and move through here quickly, Councillor Wilmer. Okay, Connex Ontario.
Yes, I have a comment. This is a good service, it's free, and I would like our residents to somehow be advised of this availability. They don't come to council, they don't read the minutes, they don't watch the TV. I doubt there'd be people watching the TV, watching this instead of something else. Well, I'd like to have this somehow provided to the public, whether it's something that staff can work on a website or something of that nature, be appropriate.
Is there a cork board at the MRF?
My belief that there a cork board.
Yeah, under glass.
I think I'll ask the supervisor of public works. Yeah, there is.
I'll leave it up to staff to figure out the
Okay.
best way of
We do have a
disseminating.
few bulletins, so we can definitely post on
Yeah.
at the township office and.
Is there
and
something can be done on a website? Is that possible? Have a look at it. I'm not saying, just have a look at it.
I'd like to see that the cork board at the PCC and the MRF, if there is one, because then the farmer's market, there's plenty of traffic through there and somebody could pick up on it, if that's possible. Any other questions or comments on Connex? Bill 108. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, Councillor Willis.
Yes, with respect to the Community Benefits Authority and the Planning Act, the question is, should we be making comments now to the province on percentages for parkland dedication fees? The closing is August the 21st. I did talk to staff, and I understand that staff will be working through our consultant on this matter and have them provide the comments. But my question is, should we be prompting the consultant to say 5% is a reasonable number?
I'll ask, maybe Ms. Wilhelm would be able to come down. Would that be in your jurisdiction? No? I can-
No, so the community benefits charge is in the, basically the comments, as Councillor Sapoulis indicated, Watson and Associates is making comments on behalf of all of their municipal clients. And they will incorporate in that some of the information in the draft regulations as it relates to how the community benefits charge would be calculated.
Okay, I'm looking for a number, perhaps 5%.
So perhaps Watson has indicated that they would provide their comments prior to the August meeting. And so we can provide their comments to council for their review. And based on those comments that council reviews, we can come up with a resolution.
Okay, then provide it on the EBR.
Okay, and that'll be in time for the EBR then, council meetings before?
Yeah,
then?
August 14th is the
Okay, that's
council
fine.
meeting.
I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on that? I spoke with MPP Ted Arnott about the CBC charge as well, and I was of the same mind. My concern is the property value and is the entire property, so there's a lot of things we got to keep an eye on. before I
Absolutely,
get on.
yes.
When I was on the conference call with the minister's clerk, they stressed over and over again to get your comments in, and because they don't know what the formula is going to be yet.
Exactly.
So we need to make sure we get this one right. Okay, the next one is GRC members. Any other questions or comments on that before we move on? Okay, the next one is GRCA members, attendees list, no comments. Okay, GTA West study bulletin, any questions or comments? Oh, my comment is that scares me because now they're gonna focus on building a different highway other than the bypass, but hopefully it's just preliminary. Next one is item 9, traffic calming and speed limit review. Any questions or comments? No. Mayor's correspondence. Proposed public health changes. Any questions or comments? No. Proposed Planning Act regulation change. Any?
Okay, the comment I have, is the county going to comment for us, or will we rely on our consultant? And I understand from talking to staff that the county is not going to comment. They did previously on that matter, and if they put a letter together, it'd be good that we just sort of piggyback on that letter.
Okay. So, Ms. Wilhelm?
So we did provide the email to all of the municipalities in Wellington for the postings that they have right now because they do affect the Planning Act. But the community benefits charge really isn't, it's a finance piece, so we wouldn't be commenting on that. The other component, it more relates to implementation of the changes to the timeframes, and it deals more with applications before the local planning appeal tribunal. And we didn't feel that there were any concerns. It's a pretty straightforward matter as intending to follow.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? All right. And we have a resolution opposing Bill 108. Any questions or comments? None. And then the township compliance report. Any questions or comments on that one? All right. Moved by Councillor Spilla, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that the intergovernmental affairs correspondence items listed on the council agenda for the July 17th, 2019 council meeting be received. All in favor? Carried. Okay, reports. All right. We have the Places to Grow Growth Plan Report. Any questions or comments? No? Okay. Next one is recommendation report, D14 EL. Oh, I gotta receive that. Sorry. Back up one sec. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Spillis. The council receives the Wellington County Report of Places to Grow Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe 2019 for information. All in favor? Carried. Okay, recommendation. Now we have the report D14 EL. Any questions or comments? Okay. Moved by Councillor Spillis, seconded by Councillor Goyda. The council receives the Wellington County Report zoning bylaw amendment application D14 EL Donald Elliott Temporary Garden Suite Extension, and the council passes bylaws to amend zoning bylaw 1985 and zoning bylaw 023/18 on the subject lands as outlined in the report. Second time for any questions or comments. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Moved by Councillor Spillis, seconded by Councillor Goyda, that report finance 2019-026 regarding the 2019 corporate energy conservation and demand management plan be received, and the council commits to the allocation of the necessary resources to implement the corporate energy conservation and demand management plan as outlined in Schedule A to report. Finance 2019-026. Any questions or comments? No, all in favor? Agreed. All right. All right. So, moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Ballmer, the report Finance 2019-025 regarding the 2019 development charges background study and bylaw be received, and that the township's 2019 development charges background study dated May 17th, 2019, attached as Schedule A to report Finance 2019-025 be approved, and that council approve the capital project listing set out in Chapter 5 of the development charges background study attached as Schedule A to report Finance 2019 025, subject to further annual review during the budget process, and the council enact a bylaw to adopt the 2019 development charges bylaw to be effective September 3rd, 2019, and the staff be given delegated authority to amend the 2019 development charges bylaw at the conclusion of the zoning bylaw appeal process. And Ms. Lessig would like to make some comments?
I just wanted to bring to council's attention, as you might notice, staff made a friendly amendment to that resolution. At the end, we added a blurb that staff be given delegated authority to amend this bylaw at the conclusion of the zoning bylaw appeal process. The reason for that is, as council is aware, the content of the DC bylaw is intended to mirror the township's recently passed zoning bylaw, which is currently under appeal, and there is section in there that might be changed based on the results of that appeal. So staff are just asking for delegated authority to update this bylaw based on the proceedings of the zoning bylaw appeal without having to come back and create a report.
Okay, questions or comments?
Need a mover and seconder, or?
It was
all embedded? No
It was
problem.
all in the first one. Okay, just changed from your package. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Roth, that council does hereby authorize the applications for cancellation, reduction, or refund of taxes, Chapter 25, Section 357 or 358 of the Municipal Act 2001 as follows. Year 2019, application 0119, roll number 5-09117, write-off amount $722.11. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, mayor's update. So our Minister of Transportation changed again. We have Mr. Mulrooney. I asked staff to forward this correspondence to her new office. I spoke with Mr. Arnott last week, discussed the places to grow, the Highway 6 bypass. He's still actively conversing with whatever minister is in place to promote this project. I'm working diligently as well. Hopefully AMO will educate the new minister, and again, just try to reiterate the business plan. We really need to focus on the economic development aspect of this project. And like I mentioned just a moment ago, that new highway, when it's on the radar more than the bypass, that concerns me. But we'll keep on the pressure, and that's what Mr. Arnott mentioned. We have to just keep the pressure on them. So any questions or comments? I did talk briefly about the CBC and our growth in the township. We do need some growth on private services, so that we can survive. And he took some notes, so hopefully he'll speak with the minister. But all in all, it was a good meeting with Mr. Arnott. Okay.
Just a comment. We had a coalition that was created to push this project through before. Would it help if we sort of canvass the original members again and say, look, we gotta redouble our efforts, we need your letter of support. Would you please send in an appropriate letter to them?
I've been in contact with Rory on and off, and I can initiate that again. Just didn't seem to have as much wind in the sail as it used to. We still have the reports. We can still talk to them and submit them. Just the coalition is kind of disbanded currently, right? I'll reach out to Rory at Maple Leaf and see if maybe he could coerce some correspondence from the old coalition, and every little bit helps.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you made the point that the GTA is focusing on the east, it sort of says, well, we're not important. Well, we're growing here. We're going to have about over 1 million people in this area, and that's a significant amount of people.
All right. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay. Where are we now? Committee minutes. You don't have any more notices of motion? Moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Roth. The council receives the following committee minutes. A, April 23rd, 2019 Recreation Committee. B, June 11th, 2019 Planning and Development. C, June 11th, 2019 Committee of Adjustment. Any questions or comments? Councillor Ballmer.
Just one question on the June 11th Committee of Adjustment. I noticed there was a note at the beginning that there was a decision before the meeting started to defer one of the presentations, or defer one of the things to the following meeting because I guess there'd been an error in notice to someone. And I wondered, was the applicant made aware of that prior to the meeting so that they could call off their consultants and avoid that unnecessary cost?
No, it was not. The situation was one of the people who has to be contacted on that was not contacted, and he was a strong supporter of the people who were objecting to the severance, or so the rezoning type of, to the rezoning, sorry. So the minor variance, I'm sorry, the minor variance. And he called me literally minutes before the meeting started, and I checked with the clerk at that time. I said, has he been notified? He says, I'm sure. Well, the clerk checked the notifications, and he was not notified. And I didn't think it was fair to have somebody who was
Understood, yeah.
was supposed to be notified, was not notified, so I deferred that item till the subsequent meeting.
I just know that there's, the applicants who do face a cost to have their consultants here for these things, and I just,
I understood, and had I known beforehand, I would have done that, and unfortunately I didn't, and I apologize to the applicant and their consultant, and that's the best I could do, and I just don't want the process to be marred by something that somebody claimed that we deliberately did not inform this particular individual. We're looking at being not transparent.
oh, I agree 100%. I think it was the absolute right thing to do. I just wondered, I didn't know what the timing of it was, if we were able to help.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I understand the concerns, and I'm sensitive to consultants cost money for it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for clarifying that. I appreciate that we're on top of that, because that's an important thing. When people ask to be notified, I think it's important. So I don't disagree with the decision that was made. I just, wanted to confirm it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right, bylaws? Any municipal announcements?
Nope.
No, I see none.
I got some hay done. It didn't rain for 3 days in a row.
Oh, that's-
4 days in a row.
That's
It was
awesome.
a miracle.
Okay. No, we don't, I didn't have municipal announcements in here. I missed it. Moved by Councilor Rowe, seconded by Councilor Ballmer, that the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. A, being a bylaw to delegate authority to the Chief Administrative Officer to approve the temporary use of the Puslinch Community Center and Township Municipal Office parking lot lands. A bylaw to establish development charges for the Corporation of the Township of Puslinch. Being a bylaw to appoint Nina Lessick as municipal clerk. Being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 1985 as amended, being the zoning bylaw for the Township of Puslinch, 4188 Victoria Road South. Being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 023/18 as amended, being the zoning bylaw for the Township of Puslinch, 4188 Victoria Road South. Any questions or comments? Councilor Ballmer.
I hate to ask this at open council. Acting clerk or acting clerk?
It's acting clerk, but the municipal act just states that it has to be clerk. So I've appointed as per the act.
Understood. You're
Yeah.
right. I didn't think about the difference there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Any other questions or comments?
Not approved yet.
All in favor?
Okay, now it is.
Now it is.
Oh, yeah, no, Madam Clerk.
Congratulations temporarily. Moved by Councilor Ballmer, seconded by Councilor Rowe, that the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 048-2019 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the Corporation Township of Puslinch at its meeting held on the 17th day of July. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councilor Rowe, seconded by Councilor Ballmer, the council hereby adjourns at 9:12 PM. All in favor? Carried. Good job. Thank you.